Indriya mano buddhi prakṛtibhyo vilakshanam tadvriti sakshinang vidyadatmanang rajavatsada. Deha, body, indriya, senses, manas, mind, buddhi, intelligence, prakṛtibhya, from all this matter, vilakshanam, distinct, tadvriti sakshinang, witness of their functions, vidyat, know, atmanang, the self, rajavat, like a king, sada, always. One should understand that the Ātman is always like the king, distinct from the body, senses, mind, and intellect, which constitute the prakṛti, matter, and is the witness of their functions.
Namaste. So this verse compares the self, Brahman, to a king. Now, whenever we have an analogy, whenever we have a metaphor, we have to check its scope. What do I mean by scope? The degree to which the metaphor matches the thing that it's talking about. A metaphor is an example. It's something similar to the topic, but different from it. So we have to understand when the verse talks about self or Brahman as a king, he's talking about that aspect of Brahman, the secondary Brahman, that identifies with the various upadhis, body, mind, senses, sense objects, time, space, experience, and especially agency. What is agency? It is the ability to use the will to perform actions. Now, to have a will, you have to have a plan. So you have to have thought, mind, language, structure, ontology, so many things in the background to support the idea of individual agency and will. However, the self, the higher Brahman, the primary Brahman, has no agency. In the last Insights video, we quoted some verses from the Upanishads, and they pretty much rule out the self being a doer, or for that matter, a person. And this touches on a very important point, which is the main point or the original point of disagreement between the monists, so that's not really a very good word, the non-dualists, just like we call it Advaita, not Eka, Ātma-Bodha. We call it non-dual, Advaita-Vada, the view that Brahman is not two, literally, not two. Why is that? Why don't we say monist, which means oneness? Because we're not keeping score, number one. And number two, if you have one, then you can have 1 + 1 or 2, or 1 + 1 + 1, 3, and so on, ad infinitum. So that brings up the possibility that Brahman could be divided. And that's not our philosophy. Our philosophy is Kevala Advaita, pure Advaita, pure non-duality. So anyway, the Vaishnavas, or the Bhagavatas, say that duality is natural to Brahman and fundamental. So in other words, they are saying that the secondary Brahman, Brahman with form, Shakti, is also eternal, which is true. But the forms, the manifestations, are not eternal. And this goes back, see, the four Vaishnava acharyas, the principal beginners of the four principal lineages, are Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarkacharya, and Vishnuswami. And they all, they disagree on so many points, but they all agree on this point, that Brahman is ultimately a person, and that this person has like unlimited agency, infinite power, in other words. So they base this interpretation on the word Purusha in the Upanishads. But then the funny thing is they don't go back and reference the Upanishads in their writings, except for one. All these four Vaishnava acharyas, these dualists, have written commentaries on the Brahma Sutra. And they call it the Vedanta Sutra because they hate the word Brahma. Brahma means one, huh? And they want to call it something else. They call it Vedanta, the end or final conclusion of the Vedas, the end of knowledge, the final knowledge, right? That knowledge, knowing which there is nothing further to know. Because knowing that, one knows all. Because it's the cause of all. And the cause is always included in the effect. Well, that's all well and good for duality. But what about the non-dual primary Brahman? There is no cause and effect, because that would be duality. There is no conscious self and object, because that would be duality. There is no doer and no doing, no agency, because that would be duality. So what happens is that the dualists get themselves they paint themselves into a corner where they have to actually deny the Upanishads, because the Upanishads insist again and again that Brahman is one, and that he enters into the various living beings and identifies with these upadis, creating the illusion that the material manifestation is real. And we talked about reflection, how when you have a reflection in a mirror, the two sides are reversed, isn't it? Right and left. Well, in consciousness, when consciousness is reflected by the mind and intelligence, there is also a reversal. But instead of right and left, it's cause and effect. Because the cause is embedded in the effect, it's the substrate of the effect. Therefore, it's visible through the effect as a reflection. But because it's a reflection, just like right and left are reversed in a mirror, cause and effect are reversed in the mind and intelligence. And this is why the scientists and even the theologians, including the Vaishnavas, the Bhagavatas, think that, in essence, duality can be the cause of consciousness. This is wrong. It's not possible. Why? Because duality has a cause. So if you say duality in any form or shape, whether it's the Supreme Person or the individual eternal soul or the mind or the body even, like the scientists say that some condition of the body, some function of the body is responsible for consciousness. Well then, what causes the body? See? Biological evolution. Well, what causes biological evolution? Chemistry and physics, biochemistry. What causes biochemistry? A chance combination of atoms in the early universe. What causes the early universe? The Big Bang. What causes the Big Bang? Duh. See, it just goes on, and this is called an infinite regress. So if you accept that consciousness has a cause, it leads to the slippery slope of then what is the cause of that cause, and so on. So we have to accept that consciousness is the absolute reflected in matter. And prior to consciousness, there exists Brahman, which is unary, undivided, boundaryless, infinite, and so on. Causeless, uncaused, independent, not dependent on anything else, original, the prime cause of everything else, even though it's not an agent and not even conscious because it has no objects. But it is aware. It is aware of itself alone. See, this is the original primary and root awareness, unconditioned, objectless awareness, which is the root of everything. This is Brahman. Therefore, it is said, how can one know the knower? How can one know that by which all is known? Not possible. Therefore, Brahman is imperceptible. So that's why we like to say the closest you can come to seeing Brahman is the light of Brahman reflected in the mind and the intellect during deep meditation, deep concentration. It's like in concentration, the mind is focused, and also the attention is focused, the consciousness is focused, like a laser, on one object alone. And because of that, its reflection appears like the sun, or even brighter than the sun. It's described in Bhagavad Gita. The light of the self is like 1,000,000 suns rising in the sky at the same time. It's inconceivable. But because Brahman is covered by upadhis, including this idea that Purusha is a person, we call that the Ishatvam upadhi. When Brahman is covered by the idea that I am the Supreme Lord. And that is the case with Vishnu and Rudra and Brahma, the three principal demigods. They think the material universe is real, and I am the Lord, I am the creator, the maintainer, and destroyer of this universe. In other words, they believe in matter, but they believe it in relation to Brahman, not independently. Matter is created and maintained and destroyed by Brahman alone. And these various gods are simply manifestations of Brahman in terms of the material modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the word Purusha, I should have said this way back in the beginning. Purusha has two completely different root meanings. One of them is a person, literally, a human being, a person, Purusha. And the other one is the controller, the master. See, this is how we get to the analogy of a king. But a king is a person. So this can cause confusion, and it did. And actually, the whole Vaishnava philosophy is based on this confusion I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend the Bhagavatas. I just want to tell the truth about it. That what we call God, the personality, the person of Godhead, is actually Brahman covered by Maya. And that's why they call us Mayavadis. But how else could it be? Only Brahman is fundamental. And if you read through the Brahma Sutras, of Śaṅkarācārya's commentary, the Śariraka Bhāsya is perfect. Yeah, it's also extremely radical, and it challenges all our fundamental ideas about what it is to be an individual, a person, a human being, etc. Still, you should read it because it completely unravels all these confusions about what is Brahman, what is the Purusha, what is God. Om Tat Sat. Om Shakti Om. Om Namah Shivaya.